what is this weekend? Like, what are we doing this weekend?
Yeah, this is just one of our standard lab days. This happens every single Saturday. All of our students come out. They spend the entire day with us. Today, we have a lot of exciting goals. We have some big structural trusses going up for our bigger overheight and mechanisms. And also every single Saturday, our San Luis Obispo team drives down. So do you want to maybe talk about that experience?
Yeah, so we wake up really early and we drive down together, trying to bring down as many students as we can. We want to welcome as many opportunities as we can for people to experience Pomona and the collaborative experience. And then we get to work all day and get to unify together. A lot of fun things that we get to experience here that are kind of unique to what we're doing at Pomona is our concealment department. They work on making cohesive meshings between all the departments. For example, they'll use neoprene, which is what you'll find on scuba diving outfits, and they'll use that to make smooth mechanisms where we'll be able to nicely put on our decorative materials.
And now, what is the goal for today? Like, when you leave today, what are you looking to have done and check off the list?
I don't know, maybe 10 goals for the day, since there are so many students here all working towards different things across our departments. I think some of the big ones are there's a pump problem in one of our engines that we're trying to get fixed so that we can drive our float next weekend. We have a test drive, so I think that's a big one. We also have all that mounting happening. We also are coming up on some float inspections in the next week or two, so we have to get all of our mechanisms to a certain point that they can be tested for the people coming down to make sure our float is safe, our safety inspections. And then we also have what's called the pod, which is basically like kind of the floor of the float, but the base that we put everything on top of. And that has some certain deadlines it has to reach for us to pass that safety inspection and for the inspectors to kind of give us the go-ahead that they think our float will be able to work smoothly on parade day.
Yeah, and then generally it's about time where we need to finalize the orders for the decoration materials. So they're working on figuring out the exact materials they'll use for different elements of the float, just to make sure that that is solidified and we can get all the materials on time. And then just a lot of working on and integrating lights with the electronics team. They're trying to solidify which light tube they'll be using so we can have the robot light up and come to life in the parade.
And what are you guys looking to do for going into next weekend? What is the things you got to do during the week to make sure next weekend is like as successful as it can be?
Yeah, so beyond our Saturday lab days, all of our execs and leadership teams have a bunch of meetings throughout the week that we check in with each other. We talk about what happened in the previous weekend as well as plan for the next weekend. So throughout those meetings, we'll look at something called our master timeline, which is a really scary Excel document. It's huge. It basically has every single lab day and then every single element on our float and kind of all of the deadlines, the progress that needs to happen, the specific steps that it will take to finish that on time. So we'll kind of meet as an executive team to look at that. So that's the chairs from all 4 departments and make sure that we're all kind of at the points we need to be. And then we'll also plan for next week. And like, for example, today, construction needs the back of the float almost all day, which means our design department can't be working back there. It won't be safe for them because they're, lifting steel trusses on the forklift in the air. So we can't have anyone underneath that. So there's a lot of kind of fidgeting that happens with making sure all of the departments can still meet their goals within the space that we have, because there's only so much space around the edges of the float. And that's kind of where everyone needs to be, especially at this time when we're building on the float as well as mounting onto the float. So a lot of space allocations, welder allocations, and then beyond our exec meeting, each department meets and they talk about their specific goals for that weekend. And yeah, making sure we're all on track and making sure we're also keeping everyone updated. So even if, I'm never working in electronics, I still know what's happening over there.
And then another important thing is just ensuring we can support all the students who are here. Our operations team will figure out the numbers and the dietary restrictions we have and plan out a healthy meal for everyone. And then for the San Luis Obispo people, we're traveling down, so we have to organize our carpools and how everything's working with coordinating that.
So what are you guys doing like right behind us? What is this weekend? What are you guys trying to do this weekend?
Yeah, so our team right now, we are finishing our final tests, and that means that we are taking a lot of different organic materials like cinnamon or floral, and then trying to best make patterns for the elements on the floats.
Yeah, and we're definitely trying to figure out how much of each material goes in. So we have a spreadsheet that we're currently working on, and we actually take those percentages, kind of figure out how much per square foot is per like material, and then from there we put it into our dry order that we do. We're trying to get that finalized today so that way we can send out that order next weekend, so that way everything gets here about design week, which is the first week to second week of December.
Now, how many materials do you think you guys are using this year?
That's a good question. I know for our robot, which is our biggest element, we're creating 3 different colors, a dark, a light, and then a mixed gray. And then each color has 4 different materials in it. So for the robot alone, we're using 12, and that's just in dry. That doesn't really count all of the fresh materials that we're using.
Yeah, and then we're also using for like our rust, there's a native plant called water dock that we're using. We're using that for some of the parts of the rust, and then a little bit of onion skin for that more lifted rust look. So in our detailed work, we can't really give you a specific number as of right now because we're still figuring that out. But by the end of this, I'm sure we'll have like at least 100 different materials just in dry.
Yeah.
Broadly as a whole, operations exists to fill in a niche of student involvement in program representation, both to students within the program as well as the campus as a whole. So what that looks like practically is that we have 5 distinct sub-departments: special events, merchandise, social media, hospitality, and graphic design. Special events does fun events during lab days and in between lab days. We host like alumni panels and holiday socials. PR social media does the social media side of things. That also includes managing our email, website, Instagram, LinkedIn. Hospitality feeds people each and every lab day. We work pretty long hours, and it's pretty strenuous work over in the lab and everywhere around lab. So we feed people a free meal each day as both a thank you for their hard work and also to keep them moving, keep them working. We also have merchandise. They design, curate, they handle all the communications with distributors, vendors, and graphic design. That department helps make the designs for the merchandise themselves. Lunch is a good measurement for the day's progress. We have a before lunch and we have an after lunch each day. And it's important to note certain people need to be eating when. Sometimes we have teams working during lunch. And so managing multiple departments and multiple projects within operations, the overlap is certainly present within the department, but it's a lot of managing our department's influence on the program as a whole and making sure that we're on the same pace with making sure everyone else stays on track in there. I love working with students from SLO because they really are taking on a large commitment to be here. People from Pomona, sometimes they wake up at their dorm room about 10 minutes away from lab, while people from SLO have to wake up early, sit in a car for hours, and when they get here, they're tired, yes. They need some rest while they're at lab, but they're motivated, they're here to work, and they're always seeking more opportunities to get further involved in what's happening here. With operations, it's a little bit difficult because operations here in Pomona is developed into a complete leadership team, whereas in San Luis Obispo, they're still working to form a complete team. So it's a lot of making sure that the people who come down here are on the same page as the people working here. It has a lot to do with communicating expectations clearly at the start of the day. I think there's a lot of room for improvement as things go on, where we can have a more active online presence between campuses, have our workflow expand from just being limited to Saturdays.
My role as an inventory lead is to inventory all of our materials and supplies within the department. So here we have the decorations trailer. It's basically just a semi-truck. We basically hold most of the materials and supplies we use during Deck Week in Pasadena. So it ranges from like beans and rice to like laundry detergent and like sponges and scissors. We have some questionable things in here that you might not expect, like laundry detergent or even like chlorine and bleach, but they all find a part and a role in Deco Week to use either washing stuff or combining stuff to create a certain texture or to be able to use. I think the most challenging part of the whole role is inventory larger items because they're just so heavy. We actually use an actual scale that we step on, and we kind of just take the weight of ourselves and the material we're weighing, but also definitely the bugs that we get in some of the materials. Some materials over the years, either it gets contaminated with moisture or just because of what it is, it starts getting bugs and like it grows eggs. So that's really not fun when you have to deal with it and it gets like really icky and we're pouring it out and it just gets everywhere. Also the cobwebs and the rat poop. So we get a lot of rats in our building, and oftentimes they get into our material shelf and they kind of just poop everywhere and it smells really bad, and they like, bite through your plastic, your containers, and then we just have a whole mess and we unfortunately just lose the material. I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, what's the thing you enjoy the most about your role though and working with the Rose Float?
I think the thing I enjoy most in working in my role is being able to organize an inventory. I personally really love organizing. So this is kind of just a real life version of Tetris and organizing, just how much you can maximize your space and how much you could fit into things. So like you saw earlier, I was like packing a lot of the floral foam in the bag, trying to just make it work and kind of maximize our space, but also making it tight so it doesn't fall during transport.
Awesome. And then I noticed that there was names on like in the trailer like of past people who worked on the Rose Float. Could you elaborate more on like the tradition behind that, or if there's a tradition?
Yeah, so I think it is kind of a newer tradition. There's definitely not as much names. I'm not exactly when it started, but I just know that most of these names are usually students that work in a Deco trailer during Deco Week, so they kind of record their name of when they started, when they ended, or kind of some of the other students in the decorations team that usually do it in here, since most of the time the trailer is typically off limits to other departments just because we don't want them to like get hurt in here or to like mess up certain stuff. So we kind of just, it's like a newer tradition, like maybe the last decade or so. My experience working at CPSLO has been wonderful. We built an amazing community here, especially during this time in design weeks. We are spending like more than 8 hours with each other for like a whole week, and we do that right up until Christmas. We get a little small break and we do it all again during Deco Week, where we spend like sometimes 13 to 15-hour days. And it's really one of those things where you kind of test your skills, your patience, and kind of just bond with each other and just kind of learn things together. Also where you make new friends. I really enjoy making new friends here, but the community I've built here as well. And just I've enjoyed my time here. It's an amazing program for all majors, and it's just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, how would, if someone is interested in the Rose Float Lab, like how do you get started? Like how do you get involved?
Yeah, so we start recruiting in fall semester. Our peak season is in fall semester. We don't really do much during spring season or spring semester. So you kind of join by starting with a sign-up sheet. So you can find us during a club rush, or we'll have like a QR code you can fill out, and that's the interest form. From there, we'll like send you email with certain details of like upcoming meetings, things you have to attend to like become part of the program. And from there, you kind of just show up every Saturday as you can, and you just work real slow.
I think the coolest part in design is that we get to see it really from the start to the finish. Like, we're the ones who take the concept and get to decide the storyline behind it, and then we get to decide the scales and how we want to portray all of our animals and our characters. And then our teams are the ones that get to start building it out of metal, and then we get to finally see it in the structure that it is right now. And so that's really cool to get to see it like come to life, pretty much.
Yeah, and I would say it's also a big part in design that we take a lot of the creativity that goes on. So we actually have a day that we like to call Big Design, that we go up to San Luis Obispo with our leadership team. When we actually decide, you know, what characters we want on the float, what the positioning of the robot should be, and kind of like how the pod is designed.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of creativity that's involved. There's a lot of good ideas that are out there. And we like to incorporate all of our leadership's viewpoints to try to decide what we want our float to look like when it goes down the parade route.
I think originally, like when we do that big design she was talking about, it's definitely there's so many different ideas in how this could be portrayed. Like we'd have this storyline, but then we get to create it. And so just try and like listen to everybody's ideas and pick out what we think would be the best for the float. And then ultimately we ended up with this, which we're really excited about.
Yeah, I'd say another challenge is when we are trying to think of the story that we want to create, a large part of it is, you know, what animations need to go onto the float to help convey that story. And so, you know, we wanted our robot arm to be raised so that the bird can take flight. So having those conversations with construction and decorations to know what needs to go onto that float to make that happen. And so that was a lot of like the mech review process, the design process.
Yeah, a lot of talking between the departments and making sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
Our goal today is to finish painting the entire float, so we'll be ready to deco. And a lot of the design role in that is finishing all of our foam details. So once we have all of our metal done, we add our foam details to make different textures and to add like different dimension. And so that's a lot of what we're doing today, to add like ears and tails and hands and eyes to all of our animals.
Yeah, this is like a really big kind of like endpoint for us in design because we have to get everything finished before we send it off to deco. Cal Poly Roseville on my resume has done like a tremendous impact when it comes to the interview standpoint, because it's not just you working in a team environment setting, it is you having to make those difficult conversations, you know, make interesting decisions and choices, right, with your team. And just having that experience has helped tremendously when I interview with people. A lot of my interviewers have said that this is one of the most interesting things to talk about because they've never actually seen this on a resume. And so to say, hey, you know, we have this gigantic robot and it needs to go under like 16 feet to go underneath the bridge for the parade. So having to tackle those different challenges and also coming from a design perspective, you know, what are some things to take into account, right? When we are designing, when we are talking with construction, decorations, and even with operations to kind of get those different viewpoints to make our story happen. That's been something that's been really interesting. And a lot of the employees that I've talked to, they've actually, you know, they thought it was like a really interesting thing to have on like a resume. And I think it's actually shown an impact in terms of the work that I've done.
What's the experience been like working with both of the Cal Poly schools, Pomona and SLO?
We love working together. It is, we have to work separately in the summer and then we get to go together in the fall. And our first joint lab day is the biggest celebration because we just love being working as a team and getting to be together. And it feels like that's when the Roseville program actually starts, once we get to be together at the Pomona lab.
Yeah, I will say it's sort of interesting when you're separated by campus over the summer. We do a lot of like Zoom calls to make sure that we're on track with everything. But we also do our leadership meetings, you know, when we're going through the conceptual design phase. So that's usually when our leadership team goes up to San Luis Obispo. But we also do our like joint leadership retreats. Those are always really fun. That's kind of like our team bonding activities that we do. But working with both of the campuses has always been something that has been very unique in terms of how we work together as a campus, but also as one as a team. Yeah. So it's just been an incredible process to have to go through that.